Hi, folks, and welcome to Film Optimists, where we talk about all things film with a hefty dose of optimism. I'm your co host, Seth Boyd.
I am Megan Tierney.
And, folks, I have to confess, we're coming back fresh from a buddy vacation.
Yeah.
Did NOLA for our birthdays are days apart. It was a great time. So, you'll see some photos of that on our feed. That's what that was about.
Hmm.
um, but we're back to talk about something very different. um, what we do best, talking about
Kind of.
movies.
Yeah.
And I was very conscious to not ask you too much about what you thought of this movie because we both
Yep.
watched it for the podcast prior to our vacation, and it
That's
was
right.
kind of eating at me. I wanted to know your thoughts. So we
Really?
watched There Will Be Blood, one of my favorite movies, and
Yeah.
a movie that is oddly personal to me in a way I'll explain later. But
Hmm.
before we get into anything else about what this is, what were your initial thoughts, Megan?
So this was a first watch for me. Shocker, shocker for my experience thus far with our movies that we pick, but enjoyable. I guess not technically a first watch. So this was a film class watch that we were told to watch the first like 10 minutes or so of this movie, the opening for specifically sound design, which I think if people
Mm,
saw the movie you'd probably like understand why. I it may even go longer than 10 minutes. I think it's like more of like
I
maybe
clocked it.
more
It's
like
nearly 15.
I think 15, yeah, 15 minutes
Yeah,
of no dialogue for the first portion of this movie. And it was really, really enjoyable. I've also heard, and I think Seth has too, like a little bit of the this has become kind of a quintessential period piece, I would say, like
mm,
of this decade. And I've heard it memeified as like sort of the Oscar grab, uh
mm,
quintessential type movie. And I was
sure.
really surprised. I don't think that's what was like going on here. I thought it was really, really well done.
Yeah,
And didn't feel like it had like this ulterior motive of very much trying to get a nomination. I think it just happened
yeah.
naturally, to be honest. And this was around the time it came out was more of the time when I kind of found the Oscars a little bit more credible and like a
Mm,
little bit more of the real cream of the crop is coming to the surface. And instead of nowadays, I feel a little bit differently. But I thought this was worthy, like very, very worthy of awards. And I really enjoyed the period piece aspect of it. I've been in kind of like that history kick, especially after coming from
sure.
our trip, which was a wonderfully historical New Orleans. I'm kind of like taking it all in and really enjoying
Yeah.
it. So,
I'm glad you mentioned that about the Oscars because I forgot that. I think it was one of those. These two movies are kind of similar. Oh, I guess one of them was a ripoff of the other, even though they're not really like that much each other. And the other movie is No Country for Old Men.
yeah,
Those were
yeah.
the two leading Oscar contenders for that year, and I think No Country for Old Men won Best Director for the Coen Brothers and Best Picture. But
Okay.
I think these were the two leading ones. It's like, well, there's a long title and it's vaguely a Western.
Yeah.
Um, it's like, yeah, but funnily enough, they were actually shot in the same, very close proximity in Martha, Texas.
Oh, wow.
And I think there might be some, at the moment, bad blood that I think is now squashed, at least I hope, during the scene where the oil well explodes.
Uh-huh.
That actually was visible for like a full day or two, where they were shooting their No Country for Old Men. So I had to shut down production because they
Oh, they were at the
when it
same time?
yeah, I mean, they were like miles
Wow.
apart, but that's how big it was. So yeah, there it was
Wow.
kind of like a weird, The Prestige and The Illusionists coming out at the same time, even though those are much more like, this is a magician movie. That these movies kind of had on paper, I think someone could say it's Oscar baity, but it's not at all. Once you watch it,
Yeah.
it's a challenging, strange movie. But it definitely was one of the most buzzed about movies. And
Yeah.
I remember people being confused and not getting the ending. And it's like, well, what do you mean you don't get the ending? What does that even mean? How do you not get the
Yeah.
ending? And I was like 17 when I saw this. I was like, I gotta find this.
Oh, it's not very like enigmatic to
No, it's
me,
not, which is
like
why
at
it was such a
all.
confusing. Everyone talked about the ending, which is a very violent kind of abrupt, but I love it.
Yeah.
Um, but
Very
this
nice.
is Paul Thomas Anderson's film, written and directed by him. A very loose adaptation of the novel Oil by Upton Sinclair.
Okay.
Uh, Very
Okay.
loose, some of these characters are there. He once, in an interview, like red carpet described it as a horror movie about the birth of California, which
Hmm.
he admitted was kind of a flippant kind of, okay, this journalist is looking for a pull quote. There it is. But then I was like, no, actually it is. That is what this movie is. It's a horror story about the birth of California. And we're following Daniel Plainview, played by the incredible Daniel Day-Lewis,
Yes.
as he's an oil man and ends up in a small town, little Boston.
Hmm.
And this movie, we'll get more into details, but for folks who need a refresher, this movie very quickly kind of becomes a competition between Daniel Plainview and Paul Dano, who
Hmm.
is the son of the ranch that they are largely buying property up on, who's the local preacher.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this weird competition between these two guys of running this town.
Hmm.
And it gets very, very intense and very unexpected.
Yes.
Um, you mentioned the historical aspect of it, Megan, and that is one thing that I think Paul Thomas Anderson deserves a lot of credit for. Is he does write his own screenplays and he researches very thoroughly, which is among the
Hmm.
reasons why there's often notable gaps in his filmography. Like he was going to oil rigs and museums in Bakersfield and reading all over the famous quote from the end of the movie, "I drink your milkshake."
Uh-huh.
That is actually from a court record. That is someone explaining the concept of drainage. That's a real thing that was said. And often his movies
Oh,
will have
wow.
a line that just feels too good to be written, and it wasn't. It is something a real person said,
That's
and
true. Wow.
in a pretty obscure document, which is something that I love about him. Like his movie, The Master,
Hmm.
one of his major resources for that was watching footage of World War II vets being interviewed about shell shock
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
um, some archival footage. So I love that he does this amount of research. It really pays off.
Yep.
And the costume in that period is great. We're talking early 1900s
Hmm.
California.
Yeah.
I think that is a good kind of backbone to have before you dive in this movie. Is this is a well-researched movie, more than I think the average film is. So something I think makes him very unique.
It certainly felt like it. I think I always harp on dialogue, but like the
Mhm.
dialogue felt very specific, almost like all like I could believe that it was records almost. I looked up if the person was if Daniel Day-Lewis's character was a real person because of
Yeah.
how specific his story was and how like calculated things were. I mean, that's just like the story, of course, but it's
Mhm.
I could very much imagine many things like this happening in that time.
Right.
And that was kind of the beauty of it too. It wasn't really like a twisty movie in any way.
Mhm.
I sort of liked how I mean it kind of was in terms of just manipulations and corporate like going ons and stuff like that, but it was pretty straightforward in terms of like it seemed very um it was essentially like the horrors of capitalism too,
Yes.
which is was very plainly on display,
Mhm.
but to see this town being developed too is really crazy, and you can just kind of I felt myself very much like falling into the world that was created around it, so that was fun. And it kind of like opens up even visually that way. Like you start
Mhm.
in a tiny little the opening scene that we talked about that has no dialogue is Daniel Day-Lewis's character like inside an oil. I don't know if it would be a rig.
Silver mine.
Yes.
He's a mining for a silver. I think initially.
Silver,
Yes.
yeah. So he starts from humble beginnings himself, but in a tiny little confined claustrophobic space. And we just see his kind of empire expand, expand, expand. Materialistically, also like the materials get a little more sophisticated and stuff like that. So just seeing all literally all that development was really, really just visually interesting and it matched the story so nicely. That was a nicely done motif almost throughout the whole
Yeah.
thing.
I'm glad you mentioned the capitalism because that's definitely a major thing in here. And I
Yeah.
think I'm blanking on the critic's name. He used to write for Peter Travers. He used to write for Rolling Stone.
Uh-huh.
Had something along the effect of, we can finally have a different movie than Citizen Kane to point to as the ultimate tale of American greed and capitalism.
Mm.
Not that he was not a fan of it, but like a much more modern movie that is effectively about the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think does a very good job about it. There's a lot of unique aspects of this movie, and there really are effectively like two guys in this movie,
I think so.
Daniel Day Lewis and Paul Dano. and I think everyone talks about Daniel Day-Lewis so much in this movie, and of course he's the famous method actor, and he
Mm.
stayed in character
Yeah.
throughout all this. And this is one of the less crazy versions of him doing that. Obviously, it's not great to go get coffee and you're talking to Daniel Plainview. Um,
Right.
I've actually heard several actors talking about the anecdotes of how fun it was to work with him on Lincoln,
Oh,
because you would
good.
go get your water, your coffee, and you could ask Abe Lincoln a question, and Abe Lincoln would answer, and he would be
Wow.
very polite about it. It's like, that sounds amazing, especially compared to Bill the Butcher or Daniel Plainview.
I've I've heard mixed things, not about like him specific, but method acting, like it is a little bit of
Yeah,
like a okay, like we're
yeah,
taking ourselves pretty seriously. But I mean I really, really enjoyed his performance in this, obviously.
mm.
But your story reminds me of like it's like a animatronic Disney character coming to life, or like because they have that animatronic like with Mr. Lincoln specifically.
Oh,
And
right.
I just I just imagine him studying that. That's
Yeah.
his muse, and I think it would
um,
work in a
that
way.
I have not seen Lincoln, so maybe it is for all I know.
It's
But
you could skip
I
it.
haven't. You can skip it.
Yeah.
Good to know. It's 2 hours I have back. Yeah, I think method acting is something in general I'm kind of borderline against. And I know you and I've talked about this because like several actresses have pointed out we can't really get away with it.
Yeah,
You can't do extreme shitty
that's
things.
right.
Although there
That's
was
right.
the joke. I think Robert Pattinson said that no one ever method actors is doing method acting playing a nice person, and then lo and behold, Margot Robbie did this as Barbie. She gave
Oh,
everyone gifts as Barbie, like Ryan Gosling would find his trailer gifts to Ken from Barbie.
oh,
So,
that's really
which
sweet.
is very lovely. But you heard about like just gross, stupid stuff Jared Leto has done for very mediocre
Oh,
performances in underwhelming films. Like
that's the issue
yeah,
at
sending cast
hand.
members dead rats and things. And
That's right. Hmm.
I like Christian Bale quite a bit, but he has nearly killed himself with the weight gain and loss
Yeah.
rapidly
Hmm.
multiple times. Um,
I think it is a
so
morality like question
yeah,
also, and I think for me it's just an ego thing. Like we really need to. I get the importance of it. I get the I in a way I kind of get it because
right,
I've been like um I've been around actors and stuff like that. We
sure,
just know that kind of world, but it kind of tends to lean towards elitism and that actors
sure,
have, of course,
yeah,
obviously, and I can never stomach elitism basically. So
yeah.
that's the moral the moral crossroads I'm at.
I fully hear, and Daniel Day Lewis, we should note, has done much more extreme things for movies. He, going back to health, nearly died in making Gangs of New York because he went
Wow.
to take medicine that was available at the time, and he had, I think, pneumonia. And his first major role in his first Oscar was for My Left Foot, which he plays a character who only has mobility of one foot, and he was actually in a wheelchair, only using his foot that whole time, which meant
Hmm.
crew had to carry him in his wheelchair a lot, and his back has been permanently injured from doing this
Wow.
movie. So he didn't do anything that extreme for There Will Be Blood. He didn't do that for a lot of extreme for the movies I most like him in, and he is undeniably captivating
Right.
and very fun to watch. And this
Agreed.
movie, I frankly find this movie very funny in a way that is not parody. Like there's a lot of lines that are just witty, or just cruel and funny. Like a
Yep.
lot of this goes to an extreme place that is frankly much funnier than a comedy, but is fully within the kind of absurdism of this
Yeah.
movie, particularly as the tensions escalate between Paul Dano and Daniel Day Lewis.
Yes.
I should know, Paul. So the kind of inciting incident here, folks, is that a guy played by Paul Dano shows up to Daniel Day Lewis's office,
Yeah.
um, which I should just say another great actor in this who plays his assistant, kind of, is Syrian Hines, who's often playing like a British general, like he plays Caesar in the series Rome.
Oh,
He plays a ship captain in The Terror. So very fun seeing him in this role, but he's great.
yeah.
Um, Northern Irish guy, I believe. But so Paul Dano playing, who we'll find out is twins, shows up saying, "I know there's oil here. Just pay me $500. I'll tell you where it is." And we don't know. He doesn't mention that his brother looks just like him. And originally, that was Paul Dano's only role, was that one scene, and a
Oh,
different actor
wow.
was going to be playing Eli. who backed out of the movie very last minute. Rumor is couldn't deal with Daniel Day-Lewis. Paul
Oh,
Thomas Anderson squashed that, said that's not what happened.
hmm,
But I don't think we've actually heard from this actor as to what did happen. But all
right.
that to say, Paul Dano learned a much bigger part within like 2 weeks and became this preacher character. And I think he does it great because
Hmm.
um, fans of the podcast will know how I feel about Baptists and evangelical
Hmm.
Christianity. But I think he's such a great, and he is this very not just fire and brimstone, but evangelical, casting out spirits, doing faith healing type of guy.
Hmm.
And this is pretty young Paul Dano. He is not a physically intimidating guy, you
Hmm.
know. And I don't mean that as an insult. He's a tall guy, but especially next to Daniel Day-Lewis, he's not a threatening person. He has a
Right.
kind of wimpy voice, and I think
Hmm.
that's the thing that I love about the character is this is someone who's trying so hard to demand respect,
Yes.
um, who is often screaming, and it sounds more like a screech or like a voice cracking in his sermons, you know,
Yeah.
who was at one point dragged through the mud, like
Oh,
like a kid getting bullied,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think that works really well, and I really appreciate Paul Dano just going for it so much as he does in this movie, and it's often overshadowed by Dan D. Lewis.
I mean, I use captivating for Daniel Day-Lewis, which I agree, of course, but he was very Paul Dano's character was to me
Oh,
captivating.
sure.
I love a preacher kind of going rogue esque character, but specifically for California, specifically for like these
Mm,
evangelical movements that were going on at the time are I also care about like believability, I guess. And
sure.
I do agree that I think that he was very believable to have people get behind. It helps that it was like this
Sure.
teeny tiny town that was literally getting, brought up before our eyes. But I think that he was not intimidating is
No.
actually was actually probably pretty helpful because I think
Yeah.
they needed like a sympathetic aspect to it that people could I think it would be kind of like you're either an oil, tough guy,
Right.
don't really give a shit about or can't even comprehend
Mm.
um a faith-based thing or something like that, or you go another route and you had to go the other route, basically. But I agree. Did you see him in the Batman, the with
Yes,
Robert
he's playing
Pattinson?
Riddler.
And I thought he was kind of the standout role for me in the
Yeah, I
Batman.
liked him that.
I thought
That's
it
a
was
pretty.
fantastic.
I'm glad he would do that as like calmly as he did.
Yeah.
That was very effective.
I
Yeah,
think
and
I
I like him for the roles for sure.
I think I possibly read that he uses that kind of like similar things going on in this movie for villainous roles, like specifically,
Mm,
which I thought reminded me a lot of what he kind of did in the Riddler. That
yeah.
it was a little more subdued. He kind of reminds me of like an Evan Peters, but
Yes.
a little
Yeah.
bit more like understated. So to
Hmm.
me, that's a little it's just that he's very niche. I think that it's kind
Mm.
of it's fun to watch him choose the roles that he does also. I think it's a bit of
Yes.
like a choice. It's not like I'm gonna do whatever.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned choosing a role too, because like his breakthrough role was Little Miss Sunshine. Did you ever
Yeah.
see that?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
So we probably talked about it a little bit. He's largely, he's the
That's right.
vow of silence nihilist, kind of worshiping Nietzsche in this,
That's
and then
right.
just not the last like third of the movie or something. But this was not that long after. This was like 2 or 3 years after, and I think he was pretty young. In
Yeah.
obviously we often have like 20-year-olds playing the teenagers, but that was an indie movie. It might have been a little different, but it's very fun to see the frustration for Dan Day Lewis because this is a guy he could snap in half over his knee, and it's just something
Right.
he loathes, which is religion. And I love that as much as he's a clever, conniving bastard, he can't fake, and he tries several times that he enjoys religion.
Yeah.
People ask him a pretty straightforward question like, "What church do you belong to?" And he kind of, "I like them all. They're all good." Something that anyone who spent time around a member of any religion would know is not the right answer, at least
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Western religion. You,
Hmm.
you can't say Catholic, Mormon, it's all good. Um, so him kind of not even being bothered enough to come up with a more do enough research to kind of lie his way through it is interesting to me because of what a smart and tenacious guy he is.
Yeah.
So that character being someone who is inferior to him in a lot of ways, but also has the masses,
Hmm.
is really
Yeah,
fascinating. He's not the just one either. The preacher's not the one who's right. He
not at
is
all.
a very manipulative person.
No, I like what you said because I think it's kind of like they needed each person needed something of
Mhm.
the other and to get to their perspective fields, like to get to the
Right.
where they needed to be. And that may have been the frustration of it. Like it was never they could never get by without one or the other succeeding kind of because I think they both needed something of the other and that was the biggest like conflict almost going on
Right.
for them, which was really fun to watch also.
Yeah. And I should know the other kind of main character here is the son, HW, who is
Hmm.
becomes deaf about halfway through the movie
Yeah.
due to an accident. But I think he's fantastic, and he's that kid actor and some of the other kids. I think maybe the most chilling moment in this movie is the son tells Daniel Day-Lewis, like, the family that is what Paul Dano is a part of. It's like, hey, the little girl who's my age I'm hanging out with doesn't like her dad because he hits her a lot,
Hmm.
and Daniels just kind of stops this girl while she's running and is sitting right across from her dad
Oh yeah.
and is saying, "Like the new dress I got you, right?" And dad's not hitting anymore, is he? And dad does not respond, is looking pissed off, but it's such
Yep.
a weird, chilling moment of like, Daniels is still a very scary character in this,
That's
but
right.
has stopped the domestic violence and so is better, and has a sense of justice and particularly knows his son likes this girl,
Yeah.
but it's such a chilling of like the control he has over this man who's not even speaking,
Right. Right.
what's being talked about. um,
The
Not
way
even
they
the father of his kids, basically.
gosh, it's true. I mean, the way they went about just little things too, like
Yeah.
little I try to like pay attention to the I guess like protocols of the era
Mm,
and stuff, and I
sure.
wondered how accurate like going like creating a church was or like how he
Sure.
recruits people. I thought it was very specific. Like I thought that felt quite accurate too. I mean, I guess I don't really know for sure, but I just felt very along for the ride and those moments like you mentioned too. I don't know, just all of the enterprise coming together felt pretty
Right.
believable, but it was done in like uh it wasn't I say again like it wasn't twisty for me, but there
Sure.
was like manipulation going on and
Mm,
just of the human you know kind that was very much on display and that was because that's so like subtle, I think it's a little almost harder to portray than
right.
something like a really twisty thriller or something like that. So I thought it was that sung its praises too. It was like kind of like a quiet thriller going on.
I think that's a great way to describe it because they had like 7 people die in this movie, pretty
Yeah.
sporadically.
Hmm.
There's several accidents at the front up in that nonverbal opening.
Hmm.
You know, there's a major explosion. There's some violent scenes,
Yeah,
but
that's right.
this is not what the movie you would think called There Will Be Blood would be in terms
Yeah.
of violence. I think to your point, Megan, of like I am not the historical expert here, but I'm assuming it is very accurate. But if it's not, it's so earned. It feels like, yeah, of course, that's how this goes.
Yeah,
you
true.
know, it
Hmm.
feels very grounded within the world he's created, E.B.
Hmm.
Anderson. We should note that cinematography is incredible in this movie, and it did
It
win the
really is.
Oscar for cinematography, and I think it was well deserved.
I'm glad.
Some
Hmm.
just stunning imagery of just. Um, I didn't realize, and I was in Austin, I think, last year,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't realize how many parts of Texas look a lot like California. Like I know it's not California, but it made me miss California
I was gonna
because it
say,
is those rolling hills.
were some of those fields like there was
Some of them
nothing?
were.
I was gonna
No,
say
there's definitely some shots were shot in California for sure.
it looked
Um,
too spot on, like even to
right?
nowadays, which was
Yeah,
that was I mean that's always gonna be fun for us
sure, of
Californians
course.
here, but like I just had to assume that that was like it literally. I mean it looked like the hills of Livermore or something like that.
Right.
I
It
couldn't
does
believe
actually.
it. Yeah.
No, yeah, he was trying to find a place that looks more like what Bakersfield did like 100 years ago or
Oh
something,
yeah. Yeah.
and that is Texas, at least that part of it. And then I think even now, I think Martha, Texas, kind of became a. I think there's like a festival there or something that's become kind of a hipster
Oh,
place. I could be wrong,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's a very beautiful landscapes. But you also have like these interiors of his church as it's being built, especially before it's fully built. And you have all this incredible light coming in.
Yeah,
Is
that's right.
fantastic. The music is great. It's by
Mhm.
Johnny Greenwood, who's the guitarist and one of the head songwriters for Radiohead.
Cool.
Um, I don't think he's been nominated for an Oscar yet, which is really crazy to me because this soundtrack is incredible.
Yeah.
He might have been nominated for it last year, but he did I think 2 movies, maybe 3 last year.
Wow.
He's worked with Paul Thomas Anderson, I think, since here on out.
Nice.
He's also did the score for Spencer and for Power of the Dog. He does very unconventional things, and it's very fun seeing like here's a guy from a rock band. Is it a rock score? Absolutely not. He has a
Yeah.
classical background from Oxford,
Right.
and it's very unconventional orchestral music
Yes.
that is very haunting and strange and has incredible rhythm things happening. I'm going to get to the why this movie's personal part is basically kind of a climax of this movie involves a local guy, one of the last people who Daniel Day Lewis has not bought land from yet,
Mhm.
and needs to for his plan to work. More his plan in a moment is going to require him to accept the faith, and this means not just do a quick prayer, but actually be baptized and accepted formally in town
Great
by
scene.
Paul Dano. It's an incredible scene, and I watched this when I was still part of what I frankly realized later was a cult, and it was a very eye-opening experience of realizing how religion can be weaponized on a much more micro scale. This isn't just religion being used to control a nation; that's a whole nother scale. But like a more small environment, and how Paul Dano was very gleefully using his religion to humiliate
Yes,
Dan Day-Lewis,
that's
and
right.
I realized that that's a thing that I had been subjected to and had witnessed quite a bit, and I didn't realize it was happening because you have this "I'm trying to help you"
Mhm.
facade. And it was
Mhm.
such a mind blowing thing to me. And again, I was 17, and I just didn't realize what, frankly, a lot of my childhood was.
Yeah.
Um, this movie so profoundly affected me because of that realization.
Mhm.
And Casino's pretty young,
Right.
but it's an incredible sequence that he's really drags out. And my favorite thing about it is afterwards he looks terrified. Paul Dano looks terrified.
Yeah.
He's kind of off the center, and I was like, I did it. That was satisfying, but oh my god.
Oh,
um,
man. I'm just so glad you brought it up. It really was. I mean, and we're also seeing I don't know, we're also seeing Daniel Day-Lewis's, acting kinda stretch in this moment too with, his performance because it's quasi performance, like, in the actual script itself, like, in the movie going on,
mm,
because it's a bit of a questionable moment, I would say, like, if he's
mm,
actually giving himself over to this, because if
sure.
not, damn, he's a good actor, like,
Mm,
in his realm, because I think
the
that
character. Yeah,
right, I think that he was, like, egging it on kind of. But
sure.
also so that was just incredible to see. It's quite a switch in him and just oh my god, so much amazing to watch. But it also I agree, like I just that felt straight out of specifically American. Like it's also like a
Hmm.
very American phenomena, I feel like to have this religious experience like that. And I think that's very specific to evangelicalism and specific to like these early Christian religions, probably specific to like Mormonism as well. Like probably I don't know, like I think that there was like a lot of this going on, which
Sure.
but not specifically at the time. I felt so connected to it now. I was like, how
Right.
often can people work themselves into a frenzy now that we see like go viral on social media?
Sure. Sure.
And that was we're going on 100 years of like like things going on like that to now that's
Yeah.
always the very interesting part to me is that like this kind of
Yeah.
frenzy especially for religion lasts like the way it does I'll always just be fascinated I guess
Oh, I mean, if you haven't gone to a faith healing, go to one as an anthropologist. Go one with a
yeah
notebook.
really
It's not real, but it is fascinating. It is
yeah
crazy, frightening. It's kind of beautiful in a way
I
of everyone
know
coming together, but it's very frightening of this kind of mass hysteria, this delusion.
that's right
Um, So yeah, this is stuff that hits very hard for me with my religious background. But and I think it also ties in for me of why I don't think it's a exaggeration or a joke to call this movie a horror movie, because you do have such a
Hmm.
strong religious thoroughfare running through this, but also worship of oil. And
Uh-huh.
um, in that opening sequence, there's a moment where they found oil, and the actual father of HW takes the oil and anoints the baby with it.
Yes.
It's like a
Yep.
religious ceremony here. It's almost something
Oh
like
yeah.
out of Mad Max with
Yes.
poured into the oil. But that is, I think, such a profound image that I frankly I think I missed last time I saw it. I didn't recall it, but it just stood out to me so strong.
Hmm.
And you do have these very chilling. Whenever there is violence, it's shot very interesting. They're very chilling moments. Like you have an
Uh-huh.
accident being described, and the score is more haunting than most horror movies by far. And a lot of it is kind of strange percussion.
Yeah.
It sounds very acoustic, organic. Like I don't know what this is exactly.
Hmm.
Sounds almost tribal, and then but also a kind of droning violin. It's perfect. And then you have these tension, like something's about to happen, and then it does. But like
Hmm.
the horror moments in this are shot better than most movies, most horror
I
movies.
right. Effective as or
Very effective. Yeah.
effective. Hmm. There was a really great score of a chugging sound like a train.
Yes.
I really, really enjoyed that. I think it
Wasn't that great?
yeah, similar things are done with like ticking noises, I guess. Like
Mm.
it reminds me of Oppenheimer, how they used a ticking
Yes,
noise.
actually. Yeah.
Very haunting is the right word, I guess, to say. Oh gosh, it I agree, like all of it really helped to create there was a darkness, I guess.
Yeah.
Even that unfolds a little bit more to the end, and it's like we're seeing a lot of opulence at the end. We're seeing this
Right.
incredible uh
It's like castle,
crazy,
basically.
yes, castle
Around.
that of like early America, which is
Mm.
amazing to see, but to I again I really really like that like progression that we go through. We're literally
Right.
in dirt going to this opulent insane mansion.
Right.
That was so fun, but it gets kind of darker as we go along, basically, especially for Daniel Day-Lewis's character.
Yeah.
So to see that progression is really something.
Absolutely. Because like he's drinking throughout the movie in a way
Oh
that
yeah.
is maybe not necessarily alarming, but by
Hmm.
it seems frankly kind of apt for the time.
Yeah.
Especially, it's like, oh my god, I just hauled out oil, or I just did something physically exhausting. I'm gonna have a swig. It's kind
Uh-huh.
of where I'm sitting down to steak dinner with my boy who just got back from San Francisco. You know, but by the end of the movie, he's an absolute decrepit drunk.
Yes.
And it was kind of fun rewatching that too, about like it's not a 0 to 60 thing. He is just drinking, increasingly
Yeah.
subtly more.
Hmm.
Um, is taking his flask out more in public,
Right.
and is subtle about it.
Yeah. I think I'm realizing like all my favorite parts of Oppenheimer
Mm.
um remind me of kind of like all of this movie because I like the
Ah,
little I think that I like the little Easter eggs that are pin you along to see the final end of the result. Like you say, that he was drinking throughout the whole movie, and it's always kind of like a just a visual thing you notice that of course he's like drinking and then drinking and drinking more, but
right.
and then it culminates to his life deteriorated at the end. I think it creates a lot of really nice tension without doing literally anything besides anything something visual.
Right.
And I kind of Oppenheimer was very like bombastic, I would feel like,
Mm.
or the thrill of it was very obviously the bomb aspect, but
Right.
I think and I do think it had, of course, some really great tension going on, but I think I like this tension was like sustained literally throughout the whole thing, I think, until the end, basically the very, very end. And if this was a long movie, this was about 3 hours, I
Yeah, this,
think.
this is a long boy for sure. This is definitely like, I think, 240 or something.
Hmm. And I actually feel that I kind of felt the time a little more in Oppenheimer than I
Mm,
did this one. I felt like I didn't watch this. This was a to go, like I didn't watch it all in one sitting.
yeah,
But I
we
felt like
fully endorse. breaking movies up in multiple settings, folks. So
I need to get over that, but I had to do it, and I
yeah,
just felt like the time flew by. Like I kind of wanted to see as much as I could
right.
of this movie, whereas Oppenheimer I was starting to feel a little bit of the time crunch. So I don't know. I think there was a little bit of more of my favorite things going on in this one.
I feel here you. This is an intimidating movie to watch the first time because of the time
Mhm.
commitment. But I really greatly enjoy all Paul Thomas Anderson movies. There's like four that I could just put on any day of the week and be
Good.
so happy after even after right after watching this. Like I might watch this again soon because I love this movie and
That's
I find
great.
it so entertaining.
Yes.
Um, I have to ask. We've talked about the dialogue in here, and there's some incredible lines, and there's very little profanity in this movie. There's
Hmm.
just some of the cruelest, most devastating things said.
Very true.
Do
Hmm.
you have a favorite? I wrote two down that just always stuck out to me.
I want to hear yours.
So Daniel Day Lewis telling the local kind of real estate guy, "Don't be thick in front of me,"
Oh yeah.
was
Hmm.
great. Just like the "Don't be stupid in my presence."
Yep.
um, and the context too is that Daniel Day Lewis has fucked up, and there's a guy who he needs to buy from that he's been avoiding going to for like a year.
Hmm.
But that's his retort. And then maybe my favorite line of this movie actually goes to Paul Dano talking to his father, saying, "Do you think God will save you for being stupid?" And
Oh, that's great too.
him being covered in mud while he says this, talking at his father. That's one of my favorite scenes too. Is after being literally
Wow.
dragged through his mud by Daniel Day Lewis, the next shot is Paul Dano, filthy, sitting motionless at his family's dinner table, and then just verbally assaulting his father, and nothing he says is wrong, and then physically assaulting his father.
Yes.
Just, which is maybe where he goes full hog here, and it's
Hmm.
great to watch.
Oh,
Um,
you're reminding me of, I wish I wrote some down. They were so good. The delivery of all of them also were so good.
mhm,
Particularly Daniel Day-Lewis, like I was really
yeah,
pretty instrumental to watch. Even just like, I don't know, the I liked the weird like just way they asked questions sometimes, or like
sure.
I wondered about,
And got and just odd
again,
questions like,
yeah, or just like the, again, the protocols of life back then, like
mhm.
how Daniel Day-Lewis and his kid go to make
Oh
camp.
yeah,
And they just ask the family for camp in their property, basically. And I was like, is that like a thing that happened? Is you just like hospitality? Is that like letting people camp on your property and
I
give
was wondering
them
about that
give them bread?
because right, they're immediately apologizing for not having bread. They're saying, we're going to bring out milk. We got you covered."
I
And
know.
I think the idea is that they're Dan Delos and his son HW,
Mhm.
something of the kid actual actor's name, are probably rich enough to have a vacation,
Maybe.
and they're
Hmm.
dressed better. So this is our betters, quote unquote, and we
Uh-huh.
need to make a good impression.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah.
I wonder if it's that, or if it is the hope of this asshole might buy some land because
Yes.
this is like a potato farm. I think it's a lot of land, and that they don't seem to know have is oil there
Right.
yet. And
Yeah.
if there is, they don't know what to do with.
Hmm.
Which I like. A lot of this movie deals with like, you have oil, cool, go get it.
Yeah.
You know, like go get a bucket.
Yeah,
Making
yeah.
that point, like, how long do you think it takes to drill, to
True.
build a well, and then to transport it? Like, you need
Yeah.
me, I don't need you.
Hmm.
um,
There was like a hierarchy, a perfect
mhm.
hierarchy almost in every encounter that he does, and that is so subtly done, but like just really effectively done. I don't know, it felt, you could feel the weight of societal hierarchy that they kind of create in him and in this world. That was really palpable, I guess. It was fun to watch. Very interesting to watch.
And I apologize, I didn't ask you this earlier, Megan. I probably have asked you this off off recording. I forgot the answer. Is this the first Paul Thomas Anderson movie you've seen?
I believe, I'll have to like double
Okay,
check, but I'm pretty sure yes. I'm pretty sure
which
yes.
I'm glad about because I also want to
Yeah,
start with the same. Much like with Bergman, this was the first one I saw, so I thought this was a good one for us to do. But
I think so.
I think a lot of things you're talking about are true about all his movies. I
Oh,
think
that's, I'm
regardless
so
of
glad.
when and where the movie takes place, you really believe this world and believe the rules that are implied of this
Hmm.
world. And a movie that I put off watching for a long time, and I don't know why, was Boogie Nights, and Boogie Nights is incredible.
Uh-huh.
And that was the second film, and it is very interesting socially because you have kind of like a Goodfellas or even The Godfather.
Hmm.
If you're in porn, who are you gonna hang out with other than other people in porn? You know,
Right.
this is a very closed circuit. Like you can't really, you don't have friends who are outside of this world, you
Yeah.
know, and that's a really fascinating element of that movie that's explored very thoroughly. So I think he's someone who really understands just societies and dynamics and micro
Nice.
ones,
Yeah.
and uh, displays them very well with great detail that feel very
That's
believable to me.
that's how it felt in this one. Like
Yeah.
that was on display.
I think we should talk about the big ending of this movie.
Hmm.
Is so obviously we're doing spoilers here, folks. There's a lot of other fascinating things that happen in this. A man comes by claiming to be his brother.
Oh yeah.
Actually, have you seen The Mummy?
I
The
think so.
'90s Brendan Fraser version. So that's the kind
Yeah.
of sleazy guy who Brendan Fraser already knows, who ends up assisting the mummy as he's um, rebuilding. The guy
Oh.
who has like every single religious symbol on him. That's the
Oh,
same
okay.
actor who's pretending to be his brother, which was, I thought he was, yeah, obviously a very different role,
Hmm.
a much more
Hmm.
subtle role. But fun to see that guy in another movie. I think
Yeah.
10 years later. Not that
Wow.
I've kept up with him, but he's good in this.
He
Anyways, I
is.
called that out because I think a lot of people were going to ask, "Is that the guy from the Mummy?" And the answer is yes, it is. um,
Good.
so the big kind of culmination here is we do jump ahead, I think 20 years, and he has his mansion. He has his Citizen Kane Xanadu incredible mansion that
Hmm.
is largely trashed interior. Like there's like he's just kind of shooting things in a long alleyway. There's
Yep.
like food trays of everywhere. He has a servant who is not the guy that's with him the rest of the movie, like early in the movie, which
Hmm.
is really interesting. Then I thought the guy was ever a servant; he was a business partner, but we don't see that guy
Yeah.
here. So maybe he wised up. I don't know. um,
Hmm.
but his drinking, Daniel Lewis's drinking, has definitely gotten out of control. And we kind of begin with some images of him just bizarrely hanging out, like I said, just in his underwear and his long johns and shooting
Yeah.
things, and
Sure.
having a conversation with his now adult son,
Hmm.
who wants to leave the company. And I think it's the conversation I have is really interesting because he keeps everything Daniel Day Lewis is telling him is, you know, you're not my son. You're this guy going behind my back. You're doing these shady dealings. I'm not like that. And he's describing things we've seen him do the whole movie. You
Uh-huh.
know, as the reveal that this is not actually his son. This is the guy who died at the beginning of the movie's
Yeah.
son.
Hmm.
I say reveal because I was too stupid the first time I watched this movie to realize he was not exaggerating. He was not
Oh.
lying. He's just like, no, I just needed a cute face. You're a bastard from a basket, and just kind of keeps yelling that at
Yeah. Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
So we have this kind
Interesting.
of very upsetting moment where he's, of course, being horrible to his son for not talking on his own,
Hmm.
and Matt is a translator there. So he's always been a cruel man, but is a much more gone, cruel, strange, kind of walking like a crane, or like a I'm a crane, like a buzzard. He's kind of bent over
Yeah.
and has this strange,
Very true.
um, upsetting look about him. And then Paul Dano comes back, who prior to our flash forward in time,
Hmm.
we see kind of him announcing he's leaving the town and he's going to go try and spread the gospel more. And he's been on the radio doing gospel shows. And
Hmm.
it's the 20s and the stock market crash has happened and is basically trying to collect
Yeah.
on what he thinks he's owed. I would say, like, the first time you're watching this movie, especially if you don't really understand geology and oil, and I'm not saying I do, the kind of twist here is a little bit confusing, but the bottom, and it might seem like it's out of nowhere,
Mm.
but it's rewards repeated viewings. But basically, his plan all along was not actually drilling on Paul Dano's land, drilling all around it, and through that you can get the oil through
Mm.
drainage.
Mm.
So he basically doesn't owe him anything. At least that's my understanding of it.
Oh, okay.
I mention this because the people who seemed confused by the ending were very confused by this. So,
That
and this
was
includes the
his,
people.
like, motive all along, or that was
Well, that's
his.
what he was doing. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
like the
that's what
plan,
his.
because that's why he's keeps going back to the real estate office to buy like everything else, and that's why he's never actually
Oh.
drilling on that
Mm.
land. Listeners, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding of it. So I also just say I like it. That's a adult movie. I mean, adult as in for grown-ups. Pay attention. You can figure this out. You
Yes.
know, you might need to watch again. That's fine, but it's not black and white. You know,
Yeah.
explain to you what he's doing. He never tells another person on camera what the plan is, but it's basically Paul Dano's trying to sell him something that he thinks is value. He says, "Nope, I already got it. You got nothing," and it really lets him think for a long time
Mhm.
that he's going to save him, but still manipulates him. Still has his
Right.
kind of revenge sequence of doing the opposite of the being saved. He wants him to say, at the same volume, "I'm a false prophet, God is a superstition," and makes him just repeatedly shout this, then telling him there's no oil for there
Yep.
left.
I know.
Um,
They're in it for the long game in this
right.
one.
It is a very, and you would think that alone is revenge, but no, he ends up killing him, chasing him with bowling pins because they're in
Yeah.
his one alley, beating him to death. And then the movie ends with my favorite last line of any movie. His butler comes in, says, "Mr. Daniel," and Danny Lewis just says, "I'm finished." Then roll credits. It's
Yes.
great.
Yeah,
It's an
yeah.
incredible ending. And you have what I think is fascinating, the music from like much earlier in the film that is the celebration of we just like opened the school or something, or we
Uh-huh.
just like cut the ribbon on the it was we cut the ribbon on the oil well.
Uh-huh.
That's the music that plays in the closing credits.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of subtle
mhm.
kind of like callbacks too, I think it
Yeah.
happened. And it's all of it, it's so nice. It's like
Mhm.
really in it for the long game is the real like phrase I want to go with here because
I
man,
love a hater. Yeah, absolutely. We had decades to do this.
it's I just wonder, I don't know if I could ever like have that in me, but it's very fun to watch other
Right.
people. So it's pretty
I don't have
amazing.
the patience. Yeah. I
Yeah,
I
I
feel
know.
yeah.
But it's very like possible for me to imagine it
Mhm.
because I'm like, well, there's kind of nothing. I mean, if you're an oil man, this is all you got.
Mhm.
Like, I
That's
I
true
think
too.
I would like kind of focus on my enemies in a way. So I don't know. I
Because actually, like, he doesn't have friends. He is
That's
kind
right.
of the only time we see him doing anything fun is when his brother is the guy he thinks is his brother is like, "Okay, we're gonna go for a swim, and we're gonna go to the brothel."
Oh yeah,
And at that point, he already is suspecting this is not his brother, so he's just kind of brooding at the brothel.
right.
Um, and we
Hmm.
see him, like, eat out with his son, and that's kind of it. We
Yeah,
don't see him do a fun thing ever, really.
maybe he enjoyed the
Um,
beach, but that was all.
maybe, and he even, like, tells somebody, like, he just wants to get away from people in general. Just I think that's one of my favorite, deliveries is he says, "I can't stand these people," but he says it with such a great delivery and
Yeah.
pauses that people sounds like the most filthy word in the English language, and it's incredible. There's so much
Hmm.
venom
Yeah,
in
it's true.
his voice.
He played a really good, like, misanthrope, but
Yeah,
that you don't hate, like, from the
no,
start.
and I think that's part of it too, is, like, you're never really like, "Oh, do I root for Paul Dano? Do I root for him?"
Of course.
You're kind of rooting
No.
for him, but rooting is doing a lot of work in that sentence,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah.
compelled by both of them. And I think if you don't know anything about this movie, you don't know where it's gonna go, but, like, by the time I had saw it, which was not that long after it came out, I had still had just heard bowling pins and I drink your milkshake and all these things that are in that last 3 minutes of the movie, you know?
Oh, I didn't I that for me was very left field. I didn't expect
Okay,
it.
I'm glad to hear this. I think South Park had a parody of this, so I'm glad to hear.
Oh, yeah.
There's an episode that
My
ends with Wendy beating the shit out of Cartman's and saying, "I'm finished," and then rolls credits, and that's great.
Oh my
But
god.
yeah, this
Now
was like
I
a definitely memeified movie for me, so I'm glad that you went into this more blind. Um,
interesting. I thought it was memeified for the reasons of, like, and an Oscar, not or like grabs that we talked about previously. I think that
sure,
people consider it like there's also an air of like pretension in the movie or like that there's
sure.
like something behind. But for me, I did not experience that in the movie like at all. That's why I was like, to me, this is
Right.
not um something like that. But I thought that's what people were memeing it for, is like that it was kind of self-serious and stuff like that,
Sure.
which I don't think it was, especially with lines like that, and with, like you say, all the music, all the
Yeah.
just all the elements, I feel like helped to make it very much its own entity and not
Right.
some factory produced thing at all.
No, I think it's bad. And I think I've definitely talked to some people who thought it was bad because they were laughing during it.
Oh,
It's like,
well,
that doesn't mean it's bad, you know?
yeah,
Like, there could be humor in it. Like, that,
that
like, a
probably means
serious movie
it's
doesn't
good.
need to bog.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, Scorsese movies are fucking hilarious, you
Yes.
know? And I think we talked about this a little bit on our Pulp Fiction episode. It's like the movie is probably more classically considered a drama, but
Mhm.
Tarantino's gone back and forth a little bit on it. It's a funny movie. A lot of
Gee,
people die in that movie, and they don't necessarily die funny. Sometimes they do,
yeah.
but it's a good movie that kind of blends things.
Oh. I I think it's very strange for people to not genre bend, kind of, or like
Sure,
it would be very hard not to do that nowadays. And
right.
so I'm all about it. That's really funny that people are like, now I guess if people, I've heard people being like uncomfortable if it's like,
Mhm.
if it's funny but also very tragic or very
Sure,
topical or something like that. Like
mhm.
Get Out was a good example of that for
Sure.
me.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I like, oh my God, that's gonna be the cream of the crop for new, I think, filmmakers coming up, and it's already
Right,
been done before. So that's very like such a interesting argument that
right,
I can't even fathom that being a
right.
problem for some people.
I'm with you there, absolutely. But yeah, I think that is just like a thing that's kind of misunderstood. Like, there are scenes in this movie that are laugh out loud funny because they are crazy, but that doesn't mean they're
Uh-huh.
wrong. That doesn't mean it's not a great movie.
Yeah.
In fact, it makes it a great movie is these sequences, these kind of
Yes.
extreme, strange things that happen. That's why I love it. Going back to an unexpected violent moment, kind of what starts the scene of Paul Dano being dragged through the mud is he just goes up to Daniel Day Lewis, where he's clearly busy and just not reading the moment and is being very pious with his posture, is walking very slowly and then saying, Brother Daniel, when will we get our first payment? And he just slaps the shit out of him. And
Yeah.
it always makes me laugh because it's an unexpected,
Right.
extreme reaction and it keeps escalating, you
Hmm.
know? And again, it's violence can be funny.
Yes.
Um, and
Yeah.
it's not necessarily slapstick comedy, but like it works. It's great. It's extreme reaction. It really works within the grounds of this movie.
I think so.
I find his movies very human. I should
Yes.
note he had kind of two um, mentors here. Jonathan Demme, who he
Hmm.
would swear he ripped off Jonathan Demme all the time. Who
Oh,
Demme's most famous film is *Silence of the Lambs*,
okay.
and
Hmm.
which is a great movie.
Yep.
And I'm not too well versed with Demme. He also did *Stop Making Sense*, the Talking Heads
Mm.
concert film.
I haven't heard. Oh,
But
okay.
Anderson has said many times people never see the connections, and I've watched these movies and I've looked for them and I don't see them. I like
Hmm.
these movies, but they seem like a very odd. Like that's the guy. The other
Yeah.
one, which to me is much more obvious, is Robert Altman, who often did period pieces and much more
Okay.
often did ensemble pieces,
Yeah.
and like really let his actors improvise. And that to me is a much more obvious influence. And
Wow.
both of them though had a very humanistic approach to
Hmm.
filmmaking. Demi said, "If you're in the frame, you're the star. It doesn't matter who the actor was," and
Mm.
I think you kind of get that with some of the Anderson movies, of like even these minor characters having great moments.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Even though you have obviously these powerhouse performances in this movie,
Hmm.
you still have notable minor characters.
Right.
Um, yeah, so he's a fascinating filmmaker who is working on his new film. We now have
Ooh.
some uh, behind the scenes footage of him with Leonardo DiCaprio have just dropped.
Ooh.
Unclear what the movie is, but we know he's in it. So
I just
very
looked up
excited to see that.
the discography too, that he did Licorice Pizza, which I heard
Yes,
about. Did you see that, Seth?
I did. I know that was a controversial movie. I
Okay, I
really
hadn't
liked it.
okay. Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll address this. I think a lot of people thought, oh, this is about a 20-something-year-old woman dating a 15-year-old. It's
Oh.
not. It's about a very odd, kind of strange relationship that ends up happening between a 15-year-old kid who is
Mm.
also a professional actor and entrepreneur, has had several businesses, asked the school photographer that day, who's Alana Haim from the band Haim, to dinner. And
Mhm.
the kind of premise, like, what happens if they say yes? And they just kind of form this odd bond where they start several businesses together. They're friends. There's clearly an age gap. He's very madly in love with her.
Mm.
There are lines that are not crossed in this movie. It is romantic. It is not sexual,
Uh-huh.
but it's
Yeah.
a very strange kind of hangout movie that also for that year had some of the best thriller sequences. There's incredible
Oh,
sequence of them driving a truck when they realize they're out of gas and
yeah.
they're being chased by a coked out Bradley Cooper. And
Right.
honestly, the best
Mhm.
thriller sequence of that year, or one of them.
Good.
I really love that movie. I think a lot of frankly prudes just kind of saw the description and didn't watch it.
Hmm.
um,
I'm sad I missed it. I remember seeing trailers for it and thought it was right up my alley just in terms of
you
like
should watch it.
the
Yeah,
way it looked.
it's a very emotional movie too for like long term fans because
Mm.
Paul Thomas Anderson worked repeatedly with Philip Seymour Hoffman,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
who
Mhm.
died of a heron overdose tragically. And the lead kid is his son. It's Cooper Hoffman, and
Wow. Oh my
man, he looks a
gosh.
lot like him. He has that weird charm. He's not the
Yeah,
most
yeah, yeah.
handsome man on the block, but like this kid's captivating. And I don't know, I think being homeschooled, I met a lot of kids like him. I met a lot of kids who had like who didn't just do the paper route, who had like I'm gardening 7 lawns in multiple districts, and this
Mhm.
kind of hustling thing. It's like I
Yeah.
get this. Like he's an actor who's in commercials. He's selling water beds. He's selling pinball
Hmm.
machines, and she kind of gets roped into all these different businesses, and it's
Oh, that's
great.
interesting. Yeah, I like that. It sounds like there's like an innocence in there too that I think that he just
Mm,
there was innocence to me in this movie as well. Like even
sure.
in Daniel's character in moments that he has with his son, there were very like extremely sincere moments between these people, but there's
Yeah, there
still
are.
like the way that there's like an underlying darkness like we talked about or just like
Mm,
manipulation going on is really really interesting. I don't know. I think that that's very well done and just very like accurate to
right.
or very very possible to people and
Right,
general.
absolutely. You can have a bad parent, that doesn't mean they never show you affection, you know?
Hmm.
Like, you have these scenes of, him holding his son who is deaf and is making a noise that he doesn't know, and he's holding him and is disturbed, but also trying to communicate to him to be quiet,
Hmm.
which is, potentially selfish, but also he's very emotional about it, and it's great.
Yeah.
It's it's a little devastating, you know?
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of that going on. It
Mm,
was beautiful in that regard too. It was really
yeah.
cool.
Well, we're definitely going to do more Anderson movies, I think, this year because it's a pretty deep well.
I'm down.
Um, I will recommend another one if we're ready to move on to recommendations.
Sure. Yeah.
Or do you want
I
any closing thoughts on this one?
I was thinking my only closing thought is my dad would like this movie, and my dad
Ah, yeah,
likes
yeah,
good movies that are historical, that spin a yarn really well, and aren't like insanely graphic or anything like that. So
sure, sure.
if you sound like Bob Tierney, go for this movie. You'll
You
like
should
it.
watch this with your dad. Let us know what he thinks.
I'm gonna
Uh,
recommend it to him.
right,
He'll really like it. I'm sure.
good. I'm going to recommend Phantom Thread is maybe my other
Okay.
favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie. These two are really
Hmm.
neck and neck, and I hope we'll do that one eventually.
Sure.
And I should just note his stuff with Philip Seymour Hoffman is fantastic. His stuff with Joaquin Phoenix is great, but something about these two that have Daniel Day Lewis just to keep coming back to. Um, and this movie is a bit of an outlier in Anderson's filmography too. He often has really fantastic female lead performances,
Hmm.
which like Alana Haim is fantastic. It's like in Licorice Pizza, and he has complicated women. This is a woman who's like in her 20s, like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing with my life. I'm hanging out with this
Hmm.
kid, like these kids, and he's worked with Julianne Moore several times. He's worked with Amy Adams and some
Okay.
incredible
Yes.
actors who have powerhouse performances. But my favorite is Vicky Krieps,
Hmm.
who's kind of unknown in the West. This actress from Luxembourg who is really holding her own against Dan Day-Lewis and Phantom Thread. This is kind of a reverse Gothic story. It's fascinating. Lewis plays a tailor, but more than a tailor, like a couture house in London.
Oh,
This is in the
yeah.
50s, and we kind of find out in the first like several minutes of this movie, his girlfriend at the time is about to be escorted out of the house because she's too distracting. He's not giving her enough attention. She can't handle it, and his sister, who's very coded lesbian, he's like, "Do you want to
Mm.
take care of that?" And of course, and so we see pretty shortly he meets Alma, played by Vicky Krebs. So we kind of assume this is going to go the same way, but she really fucks with the way this house works, and it's
Ooh.
fascinating.
Oh, I love that.
And I watched this while taking a Gothic class, and I got to do a presentation on it, which was really eye opening because it
Mhm.
subverts a lot of things. Like so often in Gothic literature, the bedroom is the prison for the woman. For
Mm.
her, that's the goal. She's trying to get into the sack with this guy.
Yeah.
um, and it's a really interesting, fun, strange movie that takes quite a twist that I find great. I don't want to spoil it for you because I think we're gonna watch this one later.
I would like
But like
to.
it has an oddly happy ending. At least that's my
Yeah.
interpretation. Some people disagree with me, but
Okay.
she is a force to be reckoned with for sure.
Uh-huh.
And it's another movie that really just has like three people in it,
Wow.
um,
Jeez.
and it's fantastic. So, highly recommend that. And that is, as of now, Daniel Day-Lewis's last movie. Although Scorsese has mentioned wanting to work with him again, so hopefully
Wow.
that gets him out of retirement.
I've seen clips of that for that got coded as ASMR when when he's cutting the
Oh,
ribbons
sure, yeah,
and
yeah.
like sewing. That's very like people eat all that up. So that's how I've
That's sweet.
seen a little bit of that movie. And it
It's
looks
also a great food porn movie.
incredible. Yeah,
Yeah, you love to see
yeah.
it. So
Cool. Well, I was so taken aback by Daniel Day-Lewis's performances. This may
mm.
have been like maybe my only role of him. I don't know why, but that's just how my life has panned
He
out.
doesn't. To be fair, he doesn't do that many movies. Even when he was acting, he would go like 10 years without doing a movie.
And which I think I remember too, but I really kick myself. So I'm gonna recommend one that's kind of still on my watch list, but I think that I want maybe after this, it gave me the itch to want to watch
Sure,
Lincoln for the first time. I can't believe I haven't seen that movie. I really want to.
sure,
Um, and I mean, everybody says it's amazing. You can see the score for Rotten Tomatoes is like 90%. So I don't really
yeah,
doubt that it's gonna disappoint or anything like that. But I feel like I'm really itching to watch something of his like that.
yeah,
So that's just gonna be my on this isn't more so of what's on my watch list next, I guess. That came up for
sure,
me in this movie, but it's a testament to Daniel Day-Lewis's performances for me in the movie. It was he captivating is the perfect word. He was extremely
right.
captivating. So I'm excited to kind of see what happens in Lincoln. I mean, I know
Fantastic.
what happens, but ultimately,
Doesn't end
but
well for Lincoln.
yeah,
um,
don't go to the play.
see what happens to support the local arts.
Yeah.
Um, no, I'm very excited to see that one as well. I also I missed it, but I've been renewed interest. Um,
Hmm.
I should note, Daniel Day-Lewis is sometimes incorrectly listed as having the record as an actor for the most Oscars. He has three. Katharine Hepburn has four. So
Ah,
he's the man. He's the
mhm.
male with the most Oscars, but Katharine Hepburn has a
Very
beat.
good.
Um, and I don't think for either of those people you can say, well, they didn't deserve that one if you look at their their Oscar lists.
Hmm.
Obviously, the Oscars have their own problems, but it is very fun to see that one person did three. That's crazy. A lot of
Right.
people have two, and then of course one person did four, even more impressive. So there's been the long-standing joke that Daniel Day-Lewis isn't retired; he's just doing research to play a retired actor. So we all hope that comes out true,
True.
especially with working with Scorsese potentially. So
Yeah, that's amazing. I'll say quickly too,
well,
like I think
yeah,
that the movie kind of gave me a newfound want to see these like historical pieces, particularly about America, because
mm,
if you're anything like me, I mean, I was pretty like anti-America for like going on a couple, couple of
sure,
years, 2016-ish to now. And
yeah,
I forget how I mean, it really is incredible the way that like capitalism came here, and even specifically that this one was California. I was like all about
mm,
it. So
right,
seeing that was really some parts are inspiring in some ways, and like
sure,
just in the sheer grandioseness of this insane country. So like I think I'm excited to delve back into that and kind of like wet my whistle again for
yeah,
American period pieces like this, and like Lincoln, like I said, I'm excited
right.
to dive in.
I think it's a great point because I know exactly what you mean. I had that phase as well, and I think it's like
Hmm.
watching these better movies when I'm older and ready for them. they're not just back in the nice days.
Oh,
They're
yeah, I
not
know.
sugarcoating anything. The ones that are worth watching are not like, and that's how we should go back to. They're very honest.
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
Hmm.
Another great period piece of Zen is The Age of Innocence, and that's like turn of the century, early 1900s New York, upper society.
Yeah.
Um, Edith Wharton, that's also directed by Martin Scorsese. One of my favorite movies,
Okay.
and it's a really great social critique for the time.
Nice. Yeah. I
I
I'm
think you'd
glad
really
you
enjoy.
mentioned that this is like Upton Sinclair adjacent,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that stuff is I mean, so fascinating, of course.
right.
I would love to see that adaptations of stuff
Sure,
going on.
that's good
So
to know.
that'd be
No.
amazing.
Well, folks, we have a lot of fun guests coming up
We
and
do
other exciting
indeed.
movies. If you have anything you want us to cover, though, as always,
Mhm.
let us know. We'll think about it. Very likely we'll have you on as a guest, like we've done before. So
And we do take
uh,
recommendations always.
we do. It's true.
Yeah.
So right in, folks. You can find us at Film Optimus on Instagram,
Hmm.
at the ever dying Twitter. We refuse to call it what the new name is. And we're now on Facebook, actually. So if that's easier for you folks, good old Facebook. Take care.